Port for more. I'd like to welcome Shain. She is the Director of Research of the Counter-Extremism Project. Julie, thanks for being with us. And Julie, Iraq's Prime Minister formally declaring victory over Islamic State in Mosul. How significant is this?
But that's not clear just yet. Again, this has been happening for quite some time. There have been a number of announcements that ISIS has been defeated, but the group continues to recruit heavily online, posting calls for carrying out acts of terrorism and violence. The group has also changed its propaganda strategy a little by focusing on Shiites torturing of Sunnis and using that as propaganda fodder to help recruit more in Iraq and Syria, and also to recruit online.
Well, clearly this is a very long way from being over. The US-led coalition saying as much that ISIS still controls certain areas outside of Mosul and that there is a big concern that they could regroup. But in terms of the message that if indeed Mosul has indeed been cleared of Islamic State, one of the centers of the so-called caliphate, does that have any kind of bearing? Absolutely. That's a victory in any way you slice it. But still, the group has been changing its definition of success for quite some time. The group has established operations around the world, including in the Philippines, in Libya, in Egypt as well. The group carries out terrorist attacks in the Sinai between Egypt and Gaza. So the group has definitely evolved and no longer touts its role as a land-controlling caliphate in Iraq the same way that it did 3 years ago. Well, the fight against ISIS, as we heard from our correspondent Shain, is still complicated with this diplomatic situation in Qatar. The U.S. has a very big military airbase over there, and U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson dispatched to the region to try and help with negotiations. What are your expectations there? It's not yet clear what's going to happen politically between the different Gulf states and how the U.S. might be able to mitigate the issue. But what we've been concerned about at the Counter-Extremism Project is Qatar's history of supporting terrorist and extremist groups politically and financially. The group, Qatar, has harbored internationally sanctioned terrorist individuals and groups, and has also paid out ransoms to a bunch of different terrorist groups around the region. So when Doha denies this, saying that these accusations that they fund terrorism are baseless, you say what to that? Well, there has been doublespeak coming from Doha. So earlier in June, on the same day, we heard from Doha that they do not support extremist groups like the Muslim Brotherhood. And at the same time, you had Qatar's foreign minister saying to the Associated Press that they have the right to support the Muslim Brotherhood. And that is not just with the Muslim Brotherhood, but also its offshoots like Hamas and other groups like the Taliban, which has a so-called political office in Doha. So Qatar has been doing a little bit of doublespeak around these issues. And that does seem to be a problem with Qatar, is that it seems to play both sides, both friends with the U.S. and at the same time friends with Iran. And it's led Saudi Arabia to make those 13 demands. And now we have Tillerson saying that they're actually impossible to meet in their entirety, but that individually some of those demands can be met and that they are reasonable. One of those is to sever ties with the Muslim Brotherhood and to stop funding any extremist entities that are designated as such. Why would Qatar refuse to at least do this in a kind of one step in this process? I can't speak to Qatar's reasons for, hosting these groups, financially supporting terrorist groups like Hamas, which has very much hurt the peace process in the Middle East. But it's what Qatar has been doing for quite some time. And Qatar has touted its process of, bolstering groups like Hamas and the Taliban as counterweights to legitimate governments by claiming that they're facilitating peace talks. And that word has rung empty when you look at the wars launched in Gaza while then leader of Hamas, Khaled Mashal, was based in Doha, and the collapse of peace talks with the Taliban, and Doha continues to host the Taliban. So it's clear that Qatar is playing some sort of game that allows it to destabilize the region, but I couldn't speak to what altruistic reasons could potentially. Well, Julie, very quickly, some would say this is rich coming from Saudi Arabia because they also support terrorist groups. What do you say to that? Again, any humanitarian issues should obviously be dealt with, whether it comes from a state sponsor of terrorism like Iran or state, purveyors of humanitarian crises. But that doesn't negate the call for
action against groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, like Hamas, like the Taliban, like Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which received hundreds of millions of dollars reportedly from Qatar through ransom payments, like Al-Qaeda's Syrian affiliate, the Nusra Front, which claimed to sever ties with Al-Qaeda, but yet continues to implement the same kind of processes that it did while it was formerly Al-Qaeda's affiliate there. So, you know, it really, no matter how you slice it, as long as a country is enabling terrorist groups, that's the main issue that we're concerned about.
Julie, thank you so much. Julie Shain.